Hello guys, this is your fanfic dojo and we are back with our new fanfic, which is what if Naruto traveled back in time and fell in love with Mito part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfic. At dawn, Mito woke up to a ceiling that she hadn't seen in decades. One she didn't think she would ever see again. With Tsunade's exodus and Kushina's death, she didn't think she had a reason to ever return to Konoha again. That changed when she met him. Though not technically family, they still shared the blood of the Uzumaki clan. Besides, as she told Naruto the day before, his burden of being a Jinchuriki was indirectly her responsibility. She needed to at least make sure that he could defend himself, something that his superiors, in her opinion, were doing an inadequate job in doing. Mito got up and dressed herself in a red tank top and a pair of black pants. She thought about putting on a pair of shinobi sandals, but opted to go barefoot instead. She then tied her long red hair into a simple ponytail. Finally, she left her room and went to the kitchen. She was surprised to see a set of dishes in the drying rack next to the sink. She knew they weren't there last night. She originally planned to cook something for Naruto, as an apology for the hell she was soon going to put him through, but it seemed that he had beat her to it. She walked to the front door and let herself out. Sure enough, Naruto was there, two Narutos in fact. The two faced off for a moment before dashing at each other. They got into a short skirmish before the real one managed to land a hit on the clone, causing it to disappear in a puff of smoke. Impressive. Naruto turned to the sound of the voice to find Mito staring back at him. Oh, hey Mito-sensei. That was the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto had already told her that he could perform the technique, however it was entirely different to see him perform it firsthand. Yay, it's a super cool jutsu I learned the night I graduated. Mito frowned at that. She remembered the talk with Naruto so many months ago and the one with Sarutobi the day before. Pieces of an incomplete picture began to line up before her eyes. It is a useful skill. Do you know it? The girl shook her head. Naruto grinned as a thought hit him. I could teach it to you if you want. I never learned the technique, not out of inopportunity but because I never desired to. The large chakra requirements made the technique inconvenient for me to use. As a Jinchuriki, you are not bound by that particular limitation. She could have probably learned the technique while she was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, however the technique fell out of her particular style so she never bothered to. Though I do know a variant, the Kage Shuriken no Jutsu. Nonetheless, I am the one who needs to be training you, if you recall. Naruto nodded. So what do we do first? I need to grab my pack from inside. Meet me out back in 15 minutes. With that, Mito turned and went back into the house. She didn't actually need that long to grab her pack, she just thought she'd take a few minutes to actually have breakfast. 15 minutes later, the two Uzumakis met up in the back of the estate. Naruto looked across the field and saw one of the most complex training fields that he had ever seen. That obstacle course is set up as a training aid, I would like you to run it. The blonde nodded and did as he was told. He climbed a rope, crawled under barbed wire, hopped between rocks, dived through a tunnel, evaded swinging sandbags, scaled up a rock wall, balanced on a beam, and jumped over a pit. It took him exactly 3 minutes to get through the course and he was actually winded after going through it. Mito, for her part, looked pleased at his run. Afterwards, the two had walked around the estate, to the large sequoia tree at the front of the grounds. The girl pointed up to the top of the tree. Do you see the kunai sticking to the top of the tree? Naruto easily spied the kunai near the top. There was an orange tassel tied around it that made it easier to see. We have 29 days before your final exam. When you have climbed to the top of the tree and pulled out the kunai, your training will be complete. Naruto snorted, I'll grab it right now. With that the blonde grinned and dashed forward, already concentrating chakra to the soles of his feet. When he got 3 feet away from the base, however, he immediately fell and slammed into the ground. He felt an immense amount of pressure pressing down on him. The tree is surrounded by an advanced weight seal. There was a great amount of mirth in the girl's tone of voice. Any human that steps within a 3-foot radius of the tree here will be affected. The seal itself increases the force of gravity around the target. At this moment, you probably weigh 5 times more than what you normally weigh. Mito reached into the seal, grimacing at the change in pressure, and pulled Naruto out of the area of effect. Once out of the array, he gasped for breath. Though the array takes time to write, it can make for an effective trap if you can manage it. No kidding, Naruto thought bitterly as he got off the ground. He took one last look towards the top of the tree. Do you see why I do not expect you to reach the kunai before the end of the month? Silently, Naruto wondered what kind of training she was going to put him through that would eventually allow him to climb a 200-foot tall tree with that seal in place. There are 3 methods to weaponizing seals for combat. I mentioned the first form yesterday, writing sealing arrays with chakra. To emphasize her point, she poked him on the cheek. She then gestured towards the tree. You have just been introduced to the second, and most common, form, placing traps. The final method is to attach them to weapons, either directly or through the use of tags. It is also the easiest and quickest method to learn and the one you will make use of during this exam. I will provide you with all the training and materials you will need, however I will not be making anything for you. Anything you want to take with you, you will have to create yourself. Naruto nodded. He could only imagine what kind of neat toys Mito had in her arsenal, but it wouldn't actually be a victory if he won using someone else's weapons. However, simply producing an arsenal of weapons will not be enough. The most important part of this next month is to train your body. Under different circumstances, considering your current level, I would suggest that you simply train your body normally. However, since we are short on time and you will be entering an important competition, we will be taking a shortcut. Naruto actually cocked an eyebrow at that. Iruka had always told him that there weren't any shortcuts to training. What do you mean? There are 2 paths open to you. Mito narrowed her eyes. The quickest and easiest method would be to take full control of the Biju inside of you. The blonde's eyes widened for a moment, before he looked down, allowing his bangs to hide his eyes. I am not sure if Hiru-chan or anyone else has spoken to you regarding it, but I can help you take control of it. I have the knowledge to do so and it would be quite a simple action for me to do. If that is your wish. Naruto didn't need much time to formulate a response. What's the other way? There was an edge in the blonde's tone. You do not approve of this method. The blonde shrugged. You're making me make my own Fuin weapons, when you could probably just give me something 1,000 times better than what I can make, and I get that. If you were to just give me something, then I would be counting on your skills, not mine. It's the same thing. If I just learn how to use the bastard fox, then I'll just be relying on its power, not mine. Mito smiled. One day, you will need to learn to use the Biju's chakra. However, I agree, you must first learn how to rely on your own strength. Mito gestured for him to follow her back around the house. My grandmother developed a training regiment that became popular in Uzushio when I was a child. She turned to Naruto. Are you familiar with the Hachiman? Naruto's memory flashed back to the preliminaries of the Chunin exams. Yay! Fuzzy brows used it against that sand guy back in the Chunin exams. The girl made a mental note to ask about the nicknames at a later time. The training regiment revolves around the first gate, the Kaiman. Normally, a human is able to use, roughly, 20% of their physical strength at a time. If a person were to use more than 20%, their muscles would degenerate. The Kaiman, in a way, acts as a limiter to protect the body from harming itself. My grandmother's training involves getting past this inherent weakness and permanently removing this limiter. Naruto nodded, trying to take her lecture in. How? Normally, You would train until you could open the kaiman yourself. You would open the seal and keep it open until your muscles get used to the strain of the removal of the limiter. You would need a competent medic nin to keep an eye on you and constantly heal any serious damage done to your muscles. During this time, the constant deterioration and regeneration of your muscles increases your physical abilities further. The regimen itself is quite painful and normally spans 6 months. She gave Naruto a sharp look. I am expecting you to do it in one. Again, how? Your healing factor, she answered. I believe it should allow you to adapt faster to this regiment. At the same time, I believe we can also throw some caution to the wind and avoid certain safety precautions. He just had to ask, safety precautions? Normally, the first month is spent becoming accustomed to moving around while under the strain of the training. We will be avoiding that and going straight to the training portion of this regiment. They finally reached the back of the compound again. Did you go through it? Mito nodded. I did, though my father's legacy did reset my body's limiter when it gave me back my youth. Your mother did as well, prior to being sealed. A tinge of anger swelled within the blonde, not at Mito, well, partially at Mito. He just wondered if his mother went through a similar ordeal with the villagers of Konoha. Though he didn't really know her, the idea of it pissed him off to no end. I'll do it. How do I open the kaiman? You do not. The girl looked at him with a solemn look. The art of learning to open the hachiman is long, so we will be taking another shortcut. She placed her left hand on the boy's head. Though he felt a strange sensation coming off of her hand, he didn't see blue chakra that was radiating from it. I will force it open and seal it so. Are you ready? She held up her other hand and it began to glow purple. Naruto gulped when he saw the chakra radiating from the girl's right hand, but nodded. Then she slammed 2 fingers into his forehead. The difference was night and day. A tremor ran through Naruto's body and his knees nearly buckled. His body temperature increased. A tinge of pain briefly flashed down his arms and legs. At the same time, he felt a surge of energy replenish his stamina. Mito watched as black symbols danced around Naruto's forehead before receding into a coin-sized array hidden under his hair. How do you feel? Still lost in the sensations of the changes, it took Naruto a few moments to formulate a response. He finally cocked a grin at her. Good. Run the course. Naruto did as he was told. The results were dizzying. He was faster, that much was evident from the beginning. The main issue was that he needed less effort for slight movements. He tended to overextend himself on several instances and nearly ended up slipping several times. By the end, Naruto landed right in front of Mito. How'd I do that time? Just under 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Your speed has increased dramatically, but you need to learn to adapt to your physical capabilities. Naruto nodded. So, what's next? Mito smiled at the boy's enthusiasm. It truly is a shame that he will not be like this throughout the whole month. How about a light run? The blonde frowned. I guess. Shouldn't we be sparring or something? Such a shame. How about a race? There are a line of trees running along the walls of this compound. The rules are simple. Do not touch the ground. Naruto actually seemed pumped up at the idea. The two of them reached one of the walls and climbed to the top of one of the trees. Mito grabbed another kunai with an orange tassel and stuck it to the tree the two were standing on. Are you prepared? Mito's stance was casual. Naruto's knees were bent, ready to launch himself to the next branch the moment she started the race. 3, 2, 1, go. Again the difference was night and day. As Naruto jumped from tree to tree he literally shook every branch he set foot on, which was emphasized by the leaves that shook free and fell. Mito, on the other hand, didn't so much as shake a branch. To Naruto's eyes, it didn't even seem like she had touched the tree at all. The only other person he had ever seen who moved in such a manner had been Kakashi. By the end, Mito had won the race, much to Naruto's chagrin. Mito just smiled back at him. Another round. How'd you do that? Do what? Naruto gestured towards the trees. It didn't even look like you were touching any of the branches. How do you move like that? The girl smiled. It takes practice. I can move a little slower this time if you want to watch me. Naruto nodded. During that day, Mito continued pushing Naruto to his very breaking point. With every passing exercise, Naruto found, much to his pleasure, that he was getting used to his new physical attribute. Between exercises, Mito lectured him on Fuin Jutsu. She would also test him on things she taught him earlier. An incorrect answer was usually followed up by a dulled projectile being hurled at his head. Lunch and dinner were the only 2 times the pair took a break, and even then Mito would lecture on and on. They even sparred a little, which is when Mito had shown him a second taijutsu style, common in Uzushigeker, named Kurokamekin. The style was infuriating. Mito just stood casually, in no discernible stance, while Naruto tried to hit her. She would normally avoid any strike by simply stepping an inch or so to the side of it, while telling him what he did wrong in any particular attack. The first time he repeated a mistake that she corrected, she grabbed his punching arm and hurled him to the side using his own momentum. Repeating a mistake after that second warning was considerably more painful. Finally, a few minutes after dusk set in, Mito invited the boy inside the Senju compound to sit inside an empty room. She gave the boy a look he had already deciphered as her, "I'm about to lecture" look. Taijutsu, Genjutsu, and Ninjutsu are the 3 most basic skills that a shinobi is expected to possess. Mito gave the boy a sharp look. "I have seen you use taijutsu and ninjutsu. Tell me, how is your genjutsu?" Non-existent. The boy could only look nervous at the question. "It is something that you will have to work on at a later time. For now, I will help you tap into a unique ability granted to you by the Kyuubi no Yoko." Naruto actually perked up at the thought. You already benefit from a supernatural healing factor and enormous chakra reserves, those are both innate. However, you can also tap into a third ability, a type of clairvoyant empathy. It means that you can learn how to sense emotions on a psychic level. The blonde frowned as he thought that over. At first he wanted to say that that particular ability didn't sound all that useful, especially if it came from the, oh so great, Kyuubi no Yoko. Why can't the dumb fox give me something that would let me blow stuff up with my mind? Then a thought hit Naruto. Could I use it to tell if people are lying to me? Mito nodded, seeming quite pleased. If you learn interpret the emotions you sense, such as sadness or fear, you should be able to use it to tell if somebody is lying to you. It is an ability that I even learned to harness in combat and to detect others at short range. Seeing the look of confusion on the boy's face, she decided to clarify. Imagine that you are alone in the middle of a forest. You suddenly sense an emotion, let's say anger or fear or murderous intent, then obviously you are not alone, are you? This time Naruto nodded. Alright, so how do we start? For now, just meditate with me. We will take this one step at a time. Mito let him go a few hours later, telling him to not go further in his training. He actually found it a shame. Despite everything they had already done, he actually still had plenty of energy. Either way, he figured he'd get an early night and wake up bright and early the next day. Luckily, the room that had been provided to him, which had once been his mother's, he silently reminded himself, had its own bathroom. He grabbed a towel to take a quick shower, and walked back out with the towel wrapped around his waist, which was fortunate, because Mito was waiting for him in his room. The girl in question was wearing a simple kimono, most likely her sleepwear. Her hair was damp, so Naruto thought it likely that she had just come from a shower herself. Hey, the boy said nervously. If you would, please lie down on your stomach. She gestured towards the bed on the other side of the small room. Before he could ask why, she answered, though I am not a medic nin, I am versed in some techniques and I would like to take a look to see how your muscles are faring to the stress caused by today's training. Naruto shrugged, they feel fine. In truth, His muscles felt like they were on fire, a sensation he hadn't felt to such an extreme since his first days at the Ninja Academy. However, he didn't feel like it was anything too serious. In fact, he was wondering why Mito said this regiment was so dangerous at all. I would very much like to see for myself. Again she gestured towards the bed. The blonde Uzumaki shrugged and decided to do as she asked. He assumed that she would just come around the bed and poke and prod him in the arms a couple of times before leaving. She did not do that. Instead she actually joined him on the bed and sat on top of the boy's hindquarters. Naruto actually yelped and looked up in surprise. Mito pushed his head back down on the bed and began kneading his back with both hands. Naruto nearly let out a moan at the sensations she was brining him, but managed to hold it in. What are you doing? He could barely see the girl hunched over his back from his peripherals. As I mentioned, I do not know any of the advanced techniques that Airyo Nin uses, so I can only look you over using less sophisticated techniques. She finished lecturing. At the same time, doing things this way is beneficial. Beneficial or not, Naruto was just grateful that he was laying face down, so the girl on top of him wasn't able to see a certain part of his anatomy. You need to consume more protein in your diet. At that point, Naruto was barely conscious enough to care about whatever it was that she said. The girl was successfully massaging away his higher-level thought processes. Once she finished on his back, she moved to his neck and shoulders, and then to his arms. Afterwards, she finally got off of him and began working on his legs. By the end, Naruto didn't even acknowledge her when she stopped and left. He just let himself fall asleep, content that the following month would be a breeze. 28 days before the finals. Naruto woke up before dawn, like he did the day before. The moment he did, excruciating pain effectively knocked any sleepiness out of him. It was so intense that he actually wanted to scream out until his lungs were hoarse. Instead, he simply let out a groan. Naruto tried to move his leg off the bed, only to feel a sharper pain erupt from it. His entire being was throbbing. Little by little, he managed to inch his way off of the bed, and fall straight onto the floor. He yelped when his body made contact with the hardwood floors of the room. The boy groaned and pushed his body up. His arms were wobbly and he found it difficult to keep his balance, but somehow he managed it. With one hand, he reached up to the bed to steady himself and slowly began to pull himself up. His knees buckled and he would have fallen flat on the ground again if he hadn't been holding on to the bed. He attempted again to pull himself up and eventually managed to, though he was hunched over the bed. Now he just needed to make it too. You did not rise early this morning. Naruto would have jumped, if the very idea didn't terrify him beyond reason. Instead he, slowly, turned to face the girl in question. Mito was, once again, dressed in the same training attire she had worn the day before. How are you feeling? A short whimper was the only response she received. I will begin breakfast, so please attempt to be at the table within 15 minutes. The girl made to leave but stopped herself as she gazed up and down Naruto. Also, please wear clothing. With that, she left the room. The blonde's eyes widened when he remembered that he had fallen asleep in nothing but a towel. And a quick glance down made him realize that the towel had fallen off when he was crawling around on the ground. He blushed, and lost his balance, sending him back to the floor again. And then, to add insult to injury, his stomach growled. The boy sighed, he just needed to get dressed and make it over to the kitchen within 15 minutes. He made it in 30. He finally managed to limp his way over to the table to find the girl in question reading a book. There were 2 bowls on the table, but only his was full, with fried rice by the look of it. He figured that she had already eaten her own portion. He sat down and wobbly grasped the chopsticks that were sitting by his plate. However, his hand refused to hold them correctly and he ended up having great difficulty picking up a single grain. He growled and dropped the chopsticks on the table and began picking at his bowl with one hand. he managed to shove a handful into his waiting mouth. Though he had never been one for fried rice, with his empty stomach and the extreme pain running through his system, it may as well have been ramen in his mind. Before he could grab a second handful, a soft hand grabbed his. He looked up to see Mito glaring at him. Wordlessly, she held up his discarded chopsticks for him. Though he tried to give her his best, kicked puppy face, she just gestured to the chopsticks again. Sighing, he took them and tried again and again, and again, and again, and again to use them to eat. Eventually he managed to pick a small portion up and led it to his waiting mouth. We should talk about the rest of your training. Naruto looked up at her sharply, as if to say, there's more. I already told you about your final test. Naruto nodded. He just had to climb a 200-foot tree, in an area where he would weigh 5 times more than he does now. Naruto nearly let his head fall to the table. In fact, not having to use muscle power to sit upright sounded kinda nice in his opinion. There are 3 more tests that you will have to complete. During training today, you will likely realize that you will have much greater difficulty controlling your chakra. Naruto's eyes widened at the statement. It is the pain, it will upset your control. Your first test is to perform the Kawarimi no Jutsu. I will expect you to remaster the technique within 7 days. Naruto looked at her in confusion. Will it really be that difficult? The replacement technique was the technique he mastered before any of the others. To think that he would need 7 days to relearn it sounded depressing. That will depend on you. The following week you will undergo a test for the Henge no Jutsu, and the week after you will undergo a Bunshin no Jutsu exam. At that last part, Naruto frowned. Can I do the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu instead? Mito shook her head. But I could never do the regular clone technique. You have learned various chakra control exercises after your graduation. Have you tried performing the basic Bunshin recently? Naruto shut his mouth. No. I expect you to have it mastered within 21 days. Naruto frowned. What if I can't? Mito gave him a sharp look. If you complete each of your exams at the allotted time, I will reward you, perhaps with a brand new ninjutsu. The blonde perked up at the idea of a new jutsu. However, if you fail to perform a technique on the day I specified, then I am afraid that I will be forced to punish you. Naruto cringed at that, then grimaced in pain. When you are finished with your breakfast, you will run the obstacle course again. The boy nodded and little by little continued eating his breakfast. Soon, Naruto found himself outside again staring at the obstacle course that he found fun only yesterday. On Mito's signal, he ran the track. He climbed the stupid rope, crawled under the dumb barbed wire, hopped between the retarded rocks, dived through a stupid ass tunnel, evaded fucking sandbags, scaled up the crappy rock wall, balanced on a beam, and finally jumped over the pit that some asshole dug in the middle of the fucking course. It took him a full 10 minutes before he was standing in front of Mito again. Run it again. Naruto sighed, but did as he was told. He climbed the stupid rope, crawled under the dumb ass barbed wire, hopped between the fucking rocks, dived through a stupid tunnel, evaded fucking sandbags, scaled up the dumb rock wall, balanced on a stupid beam, and, really, who the fuck was the smart guy who decided to dig a fucking pit? WHO does that. Again, it took Naruto about 10 minutes to finish the course. Run it again. The boy glared at her. How many times are you going to make me run this stupid course? Mito's eyes narrowed dangerously. Until you stop cursing. Will you disobey me? Naruto took a step back, remembering the girl's words from yesterday. I will expect you to follow my every command. If you do not, I will dismiss you as my student, permanently. Naruto shook his head. No, Mito-sensei. And so Naruto ran the very nice course again. He just knew this day was going to suck. The days passed on in much the same manner as it had the day before, except this time his muscles were screaming at him, and he kinda wished this time he wished for the day to end ASAP. It made listening to Mito's lectures a lot harder, which, like the day before, always ended with blunt projectiles being aimed at his head. By the end of the Naruto was grateful when he and Mito began meditating. That night, he limped his way back to his room and slowly started for the bathroom, when Mito stopped by his door again. The girl had changed out of her training attire and was currently wearing a pink bathrobe. Naru-kun, I imagine it would be difficult to clean properly in your condition. Would you like to bathe with me? Naruto's faces turned red and, after appreciating the mental image, quickly shook his head. Mito nodded, very well. I will return at a later time to check up on your muscles again, and left. The blonde sighed and let his head fall against a nearby wall. This is gonna suck. 21 days before the finals. 9 days after Mito first arrived to the village, Hiruzen managed to finally get away from his duties to visit the Senju compound. The two were having a cup of tea under the cherry tree. Not for the first time, Hiruzen was admiring the scenery around him. The garden is as beautiful as ever, Mito-sama. The girl smiled at the compliment. I agree, it truly is a sight to behold. Though it is a shame that the house has gone so long without any maintenance. How long has it been since Tsunade-chan has been here? Well over a decade, he replied before taking a sip of his tea. How goes young Naruto's training? Off to the side, they both heard an outraged yell. God damn it. Mito chose to ignore him. Well enough. What he lacks in training, he more than makes up for in strength of will. I find it remarkable. That it is, Hiruzen said with a smile. Tell me, what exactly is he doing? Mito glanced at the boy in question. He is in the middle of an exam of sorts. He simply must continuously perform the Kawarimi no Jutsu for a whole hour. That was the short version. The long version was a bit more complicated. Damn it, and painful. Hiruzen nodded. The official statistics are in for all of the prospective Chunin. They give Naruto 50-1 odds in defeating Neji. I've known Naruto long enough to know that his chances are quite higher than most people give him credit for. I think there are going to be quite a few unhappy gamblers at the Chunin exams. Mito's face twisted into a frown. It would serve them right. Hiruzen had to take a deep breath to calm himself. It was a little known fact that Mito abhorred gambling, even more than she hated alcohol. The old man cleared his throat. I wanted to speak with you about something. Have you interacted with many people since your return? The redhead frowned. I would not consider them to be many, though my viewpoint is subjective. True enough. Hiruzen nodded. Have you mentioned your name to anyone? Mito thought back to the few people she interacted with. A receptionist at the hot springs, several cashiers at the market and Hiruzen's, perky, receptionist. I gave only my first name. That's good. I've been talking it over with both Homura and Kaharu, and we all agree that it would be best to keep the truth of you return a secret from the populace. The redhead frowned. You would have me lie. The old man nodded. Would you prefer to have everyone know that you have knowledge of a way to regain one's youth? Now that she thought of it, she realized that having the population of Konohagakure know the truth promised to be an annoyance, at best, and a threat, at worst. In spite of the fact that she didn't think anyone would ever be able to reproduce the effects of her father's research, it was likely that they would still try to do so. What would you have me say? Simple. You and your mother escaped the destruction of Uzushio. When your mother passed away, you decided to come here. Senju Mito was your great aunt, which should explain your name and any resemblance you bear to her. The girl nodded slowly. It sounds simple. The old man nodded. It is the simplest explanation, by far. The teen put down her cup of tea and bowed her head to the man in front of her. By the way, I wanted to humbly offer you my talents as a Fuin Jutsu specialist. That was actually part of the reason that Hiruzen had wanted to speak with the girl. Having someone of Mito's skills looking over the village's ceiling arrays, and hopefully make improvements, was too good of a chance to pass up. Would you accept credit as payment for your work? Fuin specialists were a rare breed and as such they demanded a high price for any services rendered. With the village in the middle of the Chunin exam, I don't believe I will be able to pay your full price in actual Ryo at this moment. It wasn't that the village couldn't afford to hand out a large amount of real cash, simply the possibility of having their defenses compromised by one of the many foreign ninja within their gates made doing so highly short-sighted. Hiruzen waited until the redhead took a long sip of her tea before she answered. Credit is acceptable. He nodded, mostly in gratitude. Another thought made the old man frown though. Do you need money right away? My situation is not so desperate. However, my finances are not limitless and I will have need to replenish them in the not too distant future. In truth, I had thought about borrowing funds from the Senju accounts. Hiruzen nearly choked on his tea, however I decided against it. The cage relaxed again. It is Tsunade's inheritance and the thought of taking money from it made me feel immoral. Hiruzen nodded at her, as if agreeing with the girl's statement. Mito then turned to stare at the house. However, for her sake I think I will use some of her money to order some much-needed repairs to her home. Again, Hiruzen nearly choked on his tea, which Mito caught this time. You did bring the Senju account information, did you not? The old man sighed and rubbed his head. He was not going to enjoy this conversation. A manila folder appeared in the man's hand and he placed it on the table in front of her. The truth is, he began as Mito flipped the folder open. There is nothing left in the Senju accounts. The Uzumaki's eyes widened before she frantically began flipping through the folder. How is that possible? Tsunade could not have possibly used up so much money in only 24 years. That wasn't a credit to Tsunade, responsibility, but to the vast fortune and assets of the Senju clan. Just the liquid assets should have been enough to support a small family for decades, and Tsunade was the only Senju left. Mito's eyes kept scanning through the folder given to her. Before her eyes, Mito saw large withdrawal after withdrawal being taken out of the Senju accounts. What could she have spent so much money on? Certainly not her home. Actually, she spent her wealth in 10 years, the man thought to himself. Mito didn't need to know that though. The truth is, the old man began with a sigh. After you left, his heart began racing. Tsunade he began sweating, something of a high-stakes gambler. Left unsaid was that she was a very poor high-stakes gambler. Mito just stared at the old man before her eyes. On instinct, Naruto began using the Kawarimi to move away from Mito and Hiruzen. After finally finishing his exam, Naruto was surprised to see that neither Hiruzen nor Mito were within sight. After looking around the grounds for a while, he entered the compound to see Mito in the kitchen. His nose twitched and he had to stop himself from gagging. Did the old man leave? Mito nodded, seemingly in a daze. The girl was currently cooking, yet she was obviously just staring straight ahead. It was obvious that she wasn't even looking at what was in the pan. Oh, okay. I finished the exam. The girl just nodded again. I knew you would. It was obvious within 10 minutes that Naruto would have no problem finishing the test. The only reason she hadn't stopped him before was because she thought the repetition would do him some good. Lunch will be served soon. We can discuss your reward then. Go get washed up. The blonde nearly whimpered. Alright. Hey, by the way, you do know that those noodles are black and on fire. Surprised by the claim, Mito looked down. Oh dear, it appears that I burned lunch. No kidding. The blonde thought. The girl smiled nervously and gave Naruto a sheepish look. You have been doing quite well these past days, how about we eat out? The boy grinned. Hey, I have a question. Naruto said after swallowing a mouthful of noodles. The duo had gone, on Naruto's insistence, to the Ichiraku's ramen stand. I saw a girl using a sealing scroll during the preliminaries. She used the scroll and weapons kept appearing in her hands one at a time. Mito nodded. Yes, she began, not yet sure what his question was. But why didn't all of them appear at the same time? They just appeared one at a time. There is a special character you can place on a sealing array that will summon sealed weapons in succession, instead of all at once. I will show it to you when we return to the compound. The boy nodded and turned back to Tsuki's legendary, in Naruto's opinion, dish. Ayame was apparently running an errand and wasn't expected to return anytime soon. The old ramen chef was giving him the same weird looks that Takeshi, the old ramen vendor from Wave, had given him. Seriously, how do you give someone a thumbs up with your eyes? While the boy was caught in his musings, he hadn't noticed the man that came to sit next to him. Hey Naruto, how's it shaking? The boy in question turned and smiled the moment he saw who was sitting next to him. Iruka-sensei, what's up? He then, much to Iruka's surprise, turned to the girl next to him. Mito-sensei. Sensei. The Chunin thought suspiciously. This is one of my senseis from way back at the academy. He then turned back to Iruka. This is Mito-sensei, she's helping me train for the finals. I heard you had made it all the way, congrats Naruto. Iruka gave the girl a suspicious look. He hadn't recognized her at all, and she seemed young enough that she would have at least had been at the academy while he taught at it. He had to wonder why a girl so young was tutoring Naruto. Where is Kakashi? At the same time, Mito was giving him a cool look. She knew Naruto's education had been sabotaged. She wondered if this Iruka had taken part in it. Are you alright Naruto? Iruka looked the boy up and down. You look tired. The boy grinned nervously and rubbed the back of his head. Yay, training has been pretty intense. And painful. But I'm getting used to it and I'm getting a lot stronger too. Iruka nodded. Well, that's a good thing. Then the man turned towards the young redhead sitting next to Naruto. And you're the one helping him train. The girl in question nodded. Thanks for helping out Naruto. It has been a pleasure to work with him, she replied before taking a sip of her tea. The man looked at the girl carefully. You're awfully young though, to be tutoring someone, aren't you? After placing her cup down, Mito looked at the man coolly. Do you believe that age has a direct correlation to skill? The man blushed and rubbed the back of his head. This time he laughed nervously. Sorry, didn't mean it like that. The girl stared at the man for a few more moments. Afterwards, Mito decided that she was wrong about her suspicions. Their relationship just seemed so brotherly. After she reached that conclusion, the atmosphere in the ramen shack warmed considerably. After lunch, the two bid Iruka farewell and returned to the compound. Mito ended up asking Naruto about his reward for completing the first exam, a ninjutsu of his choice. He of course quickly said he wanted to learn a kick-ass jutsu that caused giant explosions. She then decided to mention that any powerful jutsu she could help him learn would likely only be the results of months of training his elemental affinity. She instead offered to help him get in touch with his affinity, though she doubted he would get much use out of it for several months. Instead, Naruto asked her to teach him a jutsu she mentioned when they first started their training, the Kage Shuriken no Jutsu. Much to his surprise, he actually found it to be quite similar to the Kage Bunshin and managed to learn it by the end of the day. 19 days before the finals. 2 days after the discussion with Hiruzen, a pair of Anbu had arrived at the gates of the compound. They produced a scroll that identified them as Mito's escort to the hospital. Naruto watched the display from a short distance away. What's going on? Mito glanced at Naruto while rolling up the scroll. I have applied to work on some of the arrays around the Konoha, for the Hokage. Naruto cocked an eyebrow. What, like traps? Not quite. Mito frowned. It is likely that I will be gone for a short time over the next few days. Would you be interested in coming with me for this trip? And it was only to the hospital. She doubted she would get a chance to bring him along if she were taken somewhere more restricted. Naruto shrugged. Together the group of 4 quickly made their way to Konoha's hospital and went to one of the surgery rooms. You see Naruto, doctors used a wide variety of tools in their job. One of the most common ones is, of course, medicine. This is simply an advanced form of herbalism. They also use a wide range of surgical instruments and machinery. However, Doctors that have access to Iryo ninjutsu can also use sealing arrays. Naruto interrupted. Mito nodded. They can use an array to enhance their techniques, either by fine-tuning the healing chakra or by creating a type of synergy between multiple Iryo nins. She gestured towards the giant array that was painted on the floor. This type of array is the latter. The doctor, who had been watching the so-called Fuin specialist, was actually surprised that she had managed to deduce the array's function so quickly. Take a good look at the array, because I want to point out everything that is wrong with it. The doctor's eyes widened as she began speaking another language, and the boy actually seemed to understand her. The doctor gave the two Anbu in the room a questioning look. They both just shrugged and continued watching the two Uzumaki silently. After about an hour, the duo broke away from the array and Mito asked to be taken to the next room. On the way, Naruto ran into a friend. Someone from his class, Mito assumed. She walked into the room ahead of him and began scanning the second array. After a while, Naruto waved for her attention. "Do you mind if I go visit a friend?" She ignored the "I aim to misbehave" look on the boy's face and just gestured him away. "Of course not, go ahead." Naruto and the other boy ran off a moment later. Without having to take the time to explain the sealing array to Naruto, she managed to get done with the second seal much faster than she did with the first. Soon enough, she broke off from the seal and was about to ask to be escorted to the next array when a strange man approached her. The eyebrows were just too much. "Forgive me for disturbing you, but I had heard a competent Fuin specialist was enhancing the arrays used by our doctors." Slowly, Mito nodded. The man introduced himself as Maeda Guy, one of Konoha's elite Junin, if the rumors were true. He was the sensei of a genin who had been seriously hurt during the preliminaries of the Chunin exams. He had been hoping that an upgraded medical seal would help the doctors treat his ailing student. Though she repeatedly explained that she wasn't actually an Iryo nin, the girl agreed that she would take a look at the man's student. If only to take a look at this student of his, a genin that could not mold chakra. Guy and Mito were in the middle of a discussion when they both froze. Guy took off first and Mito followed half a step behind. Guy dashed into a hospital room. Mito looked into the room and found Naruto, Guy, and the boy whom Naruto went off with. The three were standing between another boy, in a hospital bed, and a strange red-headed Suna nin with a gourd on his back. It took Mito only a moment to realize what the boy was. The girl glared at the boy in question. Gaara turned to leave the room. One day, I will kill him and he will prove my existence, along with anyone else who gets in my way. He barely spared Mito a glance as he walked by her. Naruto and Mito didn't talk about him, not until the duo returned to the Senju compound. When they finally returned to the estate, Naruto was the first to speak. "That guy was like me. He was another human sacrifice that she was, however indirectly, responsible for." The blonde rubbed his head and cursed. "That guy has a brother and a sister." "Oh." Naruto nodded. "Yay, they're a part of his team." Mito found that interesting. Perhaps they were there, as a constant reminder to keep him loyal. Or maybe they were just the only ones willing to work with him. Always wanted to have a brother or sister. I don't know, I just figured things would be easier with siblings. I wish things were so black and white. She'd seen firsthand that family didn't always mean everything, not even siblings. "Would you like to talk?" Naruto shook his head. "Nah, I just wanna go back to training." Mito nodded and silently watched him leave. 15 days before the finals. After another meeting with Hiruzen, they had been discussing some arrays within certain restricted areas that Mito had literally been blindfolded before she was allowed access to. Mito returned back to the Senju compound. She found her charge quickly enough, punching one of the training dummies that lined the back of the estate. He then hit the dummy with a roundhouse kick. Crack. Mito's eyes widened when the boy's leg broke through the dummy. The boy jerked his leg out of the dummy and cursed. "That is impressive." Surprised at the voice, The blonde turned to look at the red-headed Uzumaki. Oh, hey Mito-sensei. He briefly glanced back at the dummy before turned back to her with a nervous grin. Sorry, I guess I should stop training on these old dummies. The girl shook her head. Believe me, anything and everything within this estate, that is made of wood, is not something that is easily broken. You have become strong. All nervousness evaporated from Naruto's smile, you think? Mito nodded. I have only known a few people who could break one of those, without the use of chakra, she silently thought to herself, and they have all been much older and experienced than you are. That's great. You still need to refine your style, and work on your speed. If you cannot hit your target, then it wouldn't matter if you were 100 times stronger than you are now. Naruto frowned. Can I spar with you again? Despite all of their sparring sessions, Naruto had yet to lay a finger on the girl in front of him. He definitely understood that he needed to get a lot faster. How are you feeling? Actually, I feel a lot better. Again, Naruto grinned at the girl. Still hurts a bit, but it's not nearly as bad as it was before. I think I'm getting used to it. Mito nodded, pleased that he was starting to grow accustomed to having the stuck kaiman opened. The fighting style of the Hyuga, the Juken, is about precision and speed. Strength is meaningless to a practitioner of Juken. So from this day forward, you will practice fighting against a fast opponent. Naruto cocked an eyebrow. He had gotten used to fighting her, and she was fast. He had yet to land a hit on her. Tell me Naru-kun, do you know of the Kuchio's no jutsu? Naruto closed his eyes and crossed his arms over his chest. Uruka-sensei mentioned it at the academy. He paused for several moments. Mito nodded her head. Yes, please go on. The boy shrugged. That's all I got. The girl sighed. The Kuchio's no jutsu is a space and time technique that allows one to bring another entity from one location to the user's location. It is commonly used to summon creatures with whom the summoner has formed a contract with, however it is possible to summon humans as well. It is possible to summon other people. They have to be wearing a specialized sealing tag and it can only be done at short range, but yes, it is possible. The Hokage himself employs such methods to quickly call marked ninja, normally members of his Anbu. However, whenever you hear that someone is about to perform a summoning technique, they are likely about to summon an animal they possess a contract with. Mito drew blood and went through a series of hand seals. Kuchio's no jutsu. A puff of smoke exploded in front of Mito. When it cleared, a small white rabbit was standing in front of her. The rabbit in question was, comically enough, wearing a strip of black cloth around his eyes. 2 eye holes in the cloth let the rabbit see through it. As you can see, I have a contract with a clan of rabbits. The one in front of you is named Haruyuki and he will be your sparring opponent. An eye twitched. Before he turned his head towards the girl, you want me to fight this little thing? He's tiny. He looks like he'll fall apart if I just touch him. The time Naruto's eye twitched. Hey screw you bunny, what the hell can you do? Haruyuki growled at the boy, you wanna go brat? Let's go right now. Mito sighed as she watched the duo argue back and forth. After getting fed up, she held up a single hand, you both can settle it in a taijutsu spar. You will start in 3, 2, 1, fight. The results of the following battle were something that Naruto would never admit to, even under the threat of torture. Though Naruto had gained some speed from the release of the kaiman, the blonde was still too slow compared to Haruyuki. The rabbit hopped circles around him, hitting him with light kicks that threw the boy off balance. It ended when Haruyuki landed a kick to the boy's forehead, dropping the blonde the ground. The white rabbit landed on the boy's stomach, cackling like mad. Mito, expecting such results, kneeled down next to the boy. Haruyuki, the fastest member of his clan, and is likely faster than any of the opponents you will face in the exam. If you can learn to match his speed, then you should have little difficulty keeping up with any of your opponents. Naruto got up, but not before sending a withering stare at the rabbit. Haruyuki countered with a rude gesture. Perhaps you should practice catching him whilst running around the compound. The rabbit turned to his summoner in growing annoyance. You want him to catch me? Oh come on, that is so demeaning. The blonde pulled out a kunai. Can I at least slow him down? Mito sighed at the ensuing argument. 14 days before the finals. After yet another day of discussing ceiling arrays with Hiruzen, Mito returned back to the Senju compound. After taking a quick look around the compound, she found Naruto in the same spot she found him in the day before. However, instead of punching the targets, the boy was back to throwing kunai. Very poorly too, the boy groaned in annoyance. Not unlike his taijutsu, Naruto would later point out that he had the same sensei for both. His stance when throwing projectiles was off. It had been another thing that Mito had been helping the boy correct for some time now. Naruto held up another kunai at eye level, carefully eyeing the target in front of him before throwing it. The knife stabbed the wooden dummy in the shoulder. Better, the girl stated, startling the boy out of his concentration. However, you are still holding the blade the wrong way. The girl got behind him and grabbed his arm. Place your hand like this and, she began tapping the boy's left leg, earning a slight blush from him. Keep your legs separated just like that. Now aim and release. Naruto nodded and took a few moments to stare directly at the target. He threw the blade and scored a hit a few inches from the target's heart. Excellent. Naruto nodded, though he was still scowling at the target. I prefer Fuma Shuriken. Redhead frowned. Given your love of explosive notes, I ask that you improve with kunai. Placing an explosion seal on a Fuma Shuriken is problematic. The blonde thought that was a shame, because the idea of putting an exploding note on a really big shuriken put a smile on his face. Why? Triggering explosions on large pieces of metal can cause shrapnel to fly in indiscriminate directions. While it can be useful, there is also a chance that one of these pieces of metal will fly towards you. It is not a problem with smaller projectiles, which is why explosive notes are generally placed on kunai. Mito pulled out a kunai. She tossed the kunai, obviously off target. She then went through 3 hand seals, Soshujin no Judas manipulating attack blades technique. Before Naruto's eyes, the kunai clearly turned and stabbed itself into the dummy's heart. There are always ways around weaknesses. Naruto turned to the girl. How do you do that? It is simply a low-ranked ninjutsu, which allows you some control over a projectile that you have infused with chakra. It does not give you absolute control over a projectile, as the name may imply, however you will gain the ability to turn it while it is in the air. However, when your projectiles loses all velocity, any control you have over the blade will be useless. Can you show me? The girl smiled. You have another test today. If you manage to pass it, then I will teach it to you as your reward. Naruto nodded. The Henge no Jutsu test, right? What do I have to do? You simply must hold the technique whilst undergoing your usual training regiment. I believe an hour should suffice. Perhaps you should take the form of your sensei. Kaka-sensei. Mito nodded. Taking the form of someone with a significantly different height and build than your own is more difficult. His form should suffice. All right. He actually remembered Iruka saying that during one of his lessons. Naruto did a quick hand seal, and disappeared in a puff of smoke. A moment later, Kakashi was standing in Naruto's place. Kakashi looked at the redhead in front of him and was surprised by the scowl on her face. What? I believe your form is wrong. She pulled out a small mirror, seemingly out of nowhere, and held it up for him. Kakashi looked wrecked. Like he hadn't slept in a solid week. His Hittite was covering the wrong eye, his right one. His one visible eyelid drooped. His clothes were, vest included, looked like it had been washed with a tub of bleach. And his hair was green. Naruto didn't even know how he could have messed up the transformation so badly that he made his sensei's hair green, but there it was, green. Kakashi grinned. Whoops. Mito was clearly not amused. Naruto went through the hand seals and tried again. A second puff of smoke erupted from Kakashi's position, but when it cleared this time, Naruto was transformed into a passable copy of the Junin. The copy nin looked at himself in the mirror and let out a breath that he hadn't known he was holding. Mito was still frowning as she put the mirror away. The obstacle course. Kakashi nodded and did as he was told. He climbed a rope, crawled under barbed wire, hopped between rocks, dived through a tunnel, and came out as Naruto on the other side. The boy blinked and stared at his hands, noting the skin color difference and the sleeves of his orange jacket. As he was scanning his features, he felt an overwhelming aura coming from his left. Hesitantly, he turned his head to see his sensei staring at him. Whoops. The blonde rubbed the back of his head and laughed nervously. Mito could only say one thing: you failed. Can I try again? If you had been on a mission, you would not get another chance. The girl narrowed her eyes. I warned you that there would be consequences for failing. Naruto began to sweat. What are they? Mito had never, officially, taken up students, though she had had a hand in training quite a few students over the years. Most would speak positively of the results. Mito always carried certain expectations whenever she designed a training regiment. Most would consider Mito's expectations to be quite reasonable. However, if one of her trainees failed to meet those expectations, she was quick to imagine up a makeup exam. One that bordered on cruel and unusual. 1 hour later, Naruto in the changing room of the women's side of the hot springs. The boy in question was hanged into a young black-haired girl, which he made sure bore no resemblance to the real him. You want me to take a bath in the girl's side of the hot springs? Mito nodded, still giving him an intense look. You told me that the pain has subsided. That means that your failure was caused, not by poor chakra control, but from lack of concentration. It will be a good lesson. But that doesn't explain why I gotta take that lesson at the hot springs. Incentive, Mito replied. That day we met at the springs, I noted that there was a special for kunoichis on Fridays. Naruto's eyes widened. I imagine quite a few of the village's female ninja population will be enjoying the baths today. Mito's eyes narrowed. I can also imagine that they will be quite displeased if they found a boy attempting to hide amongst them. The boy, girl, the whatever groaned at the memory. Arguing with Mito had been useless. By the end she only had to ask if he would disobey her orders and he folded. The worst part was, she swore that she would abandon him to his fate if he were caught. For his final argument he asked if she didn't consider bringing him into the baths with a bunch of naked women to be immoral. Mito nodded. A fair point. Naruto let out a sigh of relief. You will pretend to be blind and keep your eyes closed. Naruto slapped his forehead. And if you even take a peek, I will dispel your transformation myself. Naruto shuddered at the memory. Currently, his female form was dressed in nothing but a towel. After a moment Mito, who was in a similar state of dress, came into his view. While he left his short black hair alone, she had her long red hair tied up. The girl blushed when she caught sight of his sensei. The towel did nothing to hide Mito's figure. The Mito reached over and brushed her hand down Naruto's eyes, shutting them both. Stay close. She then took the other girl's hand and led her into the springs. Naruto just concentrated on keeping his henge. The change in temperature told him when he got to the baths. The booming voices that assaulted his ears told him that there were quite a few women, probably kunoichi, enjoying the baths, as Mito had predicted. He let the girl slowly lead him into the warm waters. Mito settled down right next to him. Luckily Mito wasn't trying to strike up a conversation with him, and with his eyes closed, he really wasn't having a problem concentrating on his task. He just needed to last an hour, and at the rate he was going, he didn't think he would have an issue. Not like it's any sexier in here than it is in the men's bath, the blonde thought. From his left, Hey Chi-chan, could you rub some of this lotion on my back? The universe is a bitch and it hates me. The boy wept silently. Of course Yukiko-chan, but you'll have to lose the towel. Screw you the universe, I can ignore this. I can ignore this. I can ignore this. Want me to do your front too? Yes please, but you're going to have to rub a lot harder than that. Really the universe, really. The boy, hanged into a girl, nearly slapped his head. The idea that the pain might mess with his disguise was the only thing that stopped him. He tried to keep his mind busy and ignore the sounds and moans coming from his left side. Surprisingly, he managed to hear a vaguely familiar giggle coming from behind him. He heard a splashing sound coming from his right, where Mito was sitting. It sounded like she had stood up. Stay here for a moment. This will be brief. Naruto didn't quite understand what she meant. Until that girlish shriek reminded him of the last time he met up with the old pervy frog guy. Excuse me, old pervy toad guy, he mentally corrected himself. Pervert, pervert, pervert. That was Mito's voice. He heard many more splashes, as if many more women exited the baths. Though Naruto still had his eyes shut, he couldn't escape the feeling that all of those women were armed. Ignoring the sounds of the perverted idiot's impending doom, Naruto started chanting a different mantra. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Eventually his hour was up and Naruto and Mito slowly and carefully left the hot springs. 7 days before the finals. Naruto performed the Bunshin no Jutsu perfectly. Mito finally ended up teaching Naruto the Soshujin no Jutsu. That is all. 5 days before the finals. Naruto had once asked Haruyuki why he wore a mask around his eyes. The rabbit had responded that he wanted to keep his identity, face a secret whilst out amongst humans. Naruto laughed his ass off at the response. Haruyuki had once asked Naruto why he wore a bright orange outfit. The genin had responded that he thought orange was the coolest color ever and he wanted everyone around to notice him. Haruyuki laughed his ass off at the response. The rabbit never understood humans. Even Mito Haim, who had been part of his clan for, roughly, a century was still a mystery for him. After the blonde's answer to the orange outfit question, Haruyuki thought he understood Naruto. The boy was an idiot. Haruyuki hopped from tree to tree, avoiding the newest predator on his tail. It had been something of a daily ritual for the two, where Naruto would attempt to catch Haruyuki while the two jumped between the treetops. Recently Mito Haim had started adding traps that both Haruyuki and Naruto had to dodge during their run. The boy had yet to catch his target, but he was growing quicker and more agile. At this moment, Naruto was only a few branches away from the rabbit. The fastest member of the rabbit clan grinned and purposely slowed down. A moment later, Naruto was all but on him. Yay right. Haruyuki jumped high into the air, adding a small flip for flair, and began hopping from tree trunk to tree trunk. Eat it Blondie. I'm gonna get you, you dumb bunny. Haruyuki stopped in midair, dropping down past Naruto, before continuing his run, hop under the branch line. If Naruto truly wanted everyone to notice him, then he definitely succeeded. Haruyuki's eyes were immediately drawn to Naruto, even when he was standing next to his summoner. He suspected even the colorblind would be drawn to Naruto's outrageous outfit. It also made detecting the boy that much easier. To Haruyuki's surprise, Naruto jumped down and began hopping between the trees himself. Again the rabbit slowed down to give the boy an opportunity to catch up. Naruto took the opening to pounce at the bunny. Haruyuki jumped high into the air, barely managing to avoid the blonde, before landing on a branch and continuing his run hop. You'll have to try better than th. A glint of light, which he immediately recognized as a reflection from metal, attacked his eyes. His summoner had apparently laid a trap to fire a barrage of kunai. He prepared to leap out of the way when an orange-clad figure jumped in front of him. Haruyuki's eyes widened when he saw Naruto block the barrage with a kunai of his own, keeping the rabbit safe from harm. When he finished, the blonde turned his head to give him a grin. There was a hint of concern in the boy's eyes. The bunny blinked. He briefly turned to the position that Mito was at and saw that she was as awestruck as he was. The boy should not have been able to get in front of him so quickly. 10 days of training with the boy proved that much. It defied logic. It also stung his pride. Haruyuki scowled. Idiot, I could have easily avoided that. Naruto's smile widened. Sorry. His expression indicated that he was anything but. The boy then turned and then went to examine the trap that Mito had set. The girl went to join him a moment later. The rabbit just continued watching the boy for several long moments before he reached an epiphany regarding the blonde. Really, it was just something of a hypothesis. Naruto had donned his orange outfit to get everybody's attention. Everybody, including possible enemies. The boy purposely walked around with a proverbial target on him. 3. For what? Perhaps to draw attention away from the people around him. The rabbit shook his head. Interesting. He wondered if his teammates appreciated the gesture. You created a seal that fires kunais. Mito, whom had been about to comment on Naruto's surprising speed, shook her head. It is an altered weapon sealing array. I sealed kunais into the array and set it to launch the kunais the moment someone stepped within range of the array. Naruto turned back to the array. Can you show me what part makes it launch kunai? The redhead crouched down next to Naruto and began tracing different symbols. This character you will recognize in a weapon seal. If you attach it to this character, you can launch what is held within the seal. She traced down to the bottom of the array. Adding this part down here is part of the trap process I mentioned before. She traced an imaginary character between two others. If you were to add this character and erase this one, you could seal an offensive elemental ninjutsu and fire it as a trap. The boy squinted his eyes and crossed his arms for a moment. Can I use the forge? The forge wasn't a typical blacksmith's forge. It was actually the nickname, which Naruto had given, to a room where Mito tended to keep a large armory of weaponry and a wide range of fuinjutsu reagents. Naruto had used the room before, mainly to create some explosive tags, the only thing the boy had bothered to create thus far. You may, she said with a nod. Tell me, what are you planning to craft? I don't wanna say yet, can you give me a bit? Though her curiosity was piqued, she decided to respect the boy's wishes. As she watched the boy leave, Haruyuki walked up beside her. So, am I done? So it would seem. She knelt down to rub his head. Please give my best to Kuroyuki-hime. After the rabbit disappeared, she walked back inside the house. Hiruzen had another security seal that he had wanted her to look at, and she figured she now had the free time to do so. Besides, keeping her mind busy would be a good way to keep herself from wondering what Naruto was working on. She ended up sitting inside what had become her study over the last few weeks. Which is when she started sensing Naruto's chakra. Mito wasn't a sensor type. The only way she should have been able to sense what Naruto was doing was either if he was using a jutsu right next to, which he wasn't, or he was using a humongous amount of chakra. That didn't help her curiosity at all. While she was busy contemplating whether the seals on the compound's walls could hide Naruto's chakra output from the rest of the village, the boy in question entered the room she was studying in. Naru-kun, how did your new idea go? Naruto answered with a grin. The girl in question frowned at the boy's answer. I don't wanna say just yet. Mito opened to her mouth say something, but stopped when she felt another spike of chakra coming from the forge. If you don't mind, I wanna keep it a surprise for the finals. Since I'm pretty sure no one has done it before, I also wanna be the one to name it. Naruto ran his hand through his hair, something really badass, and with the name Uzumaki in it. Mito frowned at the boy's answer, but eventually nodded. If you wish to keep it a secret, I will not press you to tell me. However, she turned towards the direction she felt the chakra coming from. May I ask what is happening in that room? Naruto continued grinning. I got some boys working on something. The redhead narrowed her eyes. Shadow clones. The blonde nodded before turning around. I'm gonna go train some more. Mito frowned and tried to concentrate on the notes she had been going through. Though she was serious when she said she would respect the boy's request, she knew she would have trouble concentrating until he revealed his secret. In the end, the redhead could only sigh. 2 days before the finals, Mito woke up at the crack of dawn like she did every morning. She went through her quick routine, which ended with her getting dressed in her usual training outfit. She walked out of her room and went to wake Naruto up. To her shock, Naruto was not in his room. She took a quick walk around the house. When she walked by the kitchen, she noticed some already washed dishes sitting in the drying rack next to the sink. Today marked the first day, since they first started their training, that Naruto had gotten up earlier than she had. The redhead turned to walk to the front door. She half expected to find Naruto training with a clone, like she sometimes found him. She opened and walked through the doorway, but didn't see the blonde. She took a few steps outside to look for the boy. She heard a strange whistling sound she had come to associate with metal cutting through the air. The girl tensed up and turned her head to see an object flying through the air. Though she had calculated the trajectory, she still flinched when a kunai, with an orange tassel, embedded itself into the ground right next to her. Mito smiled and looked up to the top of the sequoia to find Naruto lounging on one of the branches near the top. Though she doubted he would hear her, the girl made a show of clapping her hands. Up in the tree, Naruto cupped his hand next to his mouth and called down. More weight. For he wasn't sure if she heard him, and he silently hoped that she didn't take him seriously if she had. However, Naruto leaned back against the tree and sighed. Neji Tem is going down. Far away, Jiraiya was lounging around, still bored. End. Omake. Assholes with summoning jutsu. A.N. Created after watching too much Robot Chicken, which I don't own. The 4 members of Team 7 were having a minor training exercise in the forest. It was essentially the bell test all over again. Naruto, though slightly embarrassed by his posture, was bent over a log, waiting. Predictably, Kakashi appeared right behind him, holding the Tora seal. Senin Garashi. Kuchio's no jutsu. Before Kakashi's attack could connect, Sasuke appeared right behind him and took the hit, sending the Uchiha flying. Both Naruto and Kakashi watched on in amusement. Naruto then turned towards the metaphorical screen and did his best nice guy pose. Assholes with summoning jutsu. Naruto just happened to be walking by the Hokage's office when he spotted Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Shizune. All 3 of them had their backs turned to him. Naruto walked up to the tree. Naruto licked the palm of his right hand and then smacked blonde woman across the ass as hard as he could. The resounding smack immediately got the attention of the woman's 2 companions. They both turned to look at the boy in growing horror. Naruto just gave them a cheeky grin. Tsunade, key flaring, slowly turned towards Naruto, a look of murder in her eyes. Jiraiya would have flashed the boy a thumbs up, but was far too nervous to do so. Shizune silently prayed that the boy's death was swift and painless, though she had to admit that it was probably well-deserved. The legendary medic Nin cocked her fist back and aimed a chakra-enhanced fist at the boy's head. Kuchio's no jutsu. Just then, Sasuke appeared between him and Tsunade. Everyone in the room watched as Tsunade's fist made contact with the boy, sending the Uchiha flying through a wall. Naruto then turned towards the metaphorical screen and did his best nice guy pose. Assholes with summoning jutsu. Naruto, transformed as a girl again, was sitting in the ladies' side of the Konoha hot springs. It was kunoichi night again. It seemed that he was sharing the baths with at least 5 dozen kunoichi. Kuchio's no jutsu. Just then Sasuke appeared in the middle of the hot springs, and he immediately had about 60 pair of eyes narrow in on him. Pervert. While Sasuke got jumped by several armed women, girl Naruto turned towards the metaphorical screen and did her best nice guy girl pose. Assholes with summoning jutsu. Naruto just happened to be walking by the road when he spotted a crying Sakura. Hey Sakura, what's up? The girl turned towards Naruto with tear-stained eyes. Sasuke-kun abandoned the village. The blonde shrugged and did a few hand seals, Kuchio's no jutsu. In a puff of smoke, Sasuke appeared in front of the two. The Uchiha glared at the boy, whom he abandoned Konoha to get away from. Oh come on. Kuchio's no jutsu. Suddenly Shikamaru appeared next to Naruto, looking dazed. Sasuke was still glaring at Naruto. Hey rule of three asshole. Naruto grabbed Shikamaru by the arm, threw him over his shoulder, and slammed him onto the Uchiha. Naruto then turned towards the metaphorical screen and did his best nice guy pose. So by the end of Hiru-chan's little experiment, he and his two teammates were bald, naked and covered in honey. Mito and Naruto were both laughing by the end of the story. Naruto snickered, all that, because the old man wanted to learn how to use a sword. Hiru-chan has refused to pick up a katana since that day. The blonde snorted, greatest story ever. He would definitely remember that one. Dusk approached on the last day before the finals of the Chunin exams. Though Naruto had done some training earlier, on Mito's insistence he decided to take it easy. Mito called him inside hours before sunset, stating that he would get more out of resting for the remainder of the day. He then washed up and joined Mito for dinner. They had ordered out, quite a large meal at that. Naruto took another bite of the ramen. Though it didn't hold a candle to Ichiraku's, he had yet to find a place that did, he still found it quite good. Never knew the old man had a wild side when he was a kid. Oh, you would be quite surprised how often respectable figures had a wild side in their youth. She raised her cup of tea to hide her growing smile. You wish to become the Hokage in the future, do you not? Though he nodded, Mito didn't wait for a response. I am sure that some child in the future would be surprised to learn that you painted graffiti over the Hokage's monument when you were just 12 years old. She then sipped her tea. Naruto blushed at the comment, and rubbed the back of his head. Yay, I guess. Mito placed her cup down. You know, you actually remind me of someone I knew when I was just a little girl. Do I? Mito got a distant look on her features. He was a dear friend of mine growing up. He was very excitable. Naruto looked up. Now that I think about it, you've never really talked about your family. Mito gave Naruto a blank look. My childhood was not very exciting. My father was the leader of the Uzumaki clan. My mother died when I was young, so I did not know her too well. I had an older brother, who ended up succeeding my father as the clan leader. My childhood was spent learning the shinobi arts. Naruto grinned. You wanted to be a ninja? Mito shook her head. Not at all. What I truly wanted was to become skilled enough to defend both my home and myself, if the need arose. I had no desire to journey out of my village, to sell my skills. Mito momentarily looked away from him. After my training was complete, my father placed me in the village's defense corps. Afterwards, I spent my time studying Fuinjutsu. Did Uzushio have its own academy? Again, Mito shook her head. No. Each prospective shinobi was trained by a relative. However, my father did design and fund certain exercises that shinobi hopefuls could take part in. She stared at him for a moment. It was at one of those exercises that I met that friend I mentioned before. They divided all of the children up into two teams. One side protected a VIP, while the other side tried to defeat or capture her. Naruto caught her choice of words. You, indeed. Mito nodded. I was the one chosen to play the VIP. Kurohoshi, that was my friend's name, was on the other side. My group was forced to stay in the open, while Kurohoshi's team were advised to stick to the shadows. Mito smiled and tried to suppress her laughter. Instead, Kurohoshi climbed to the highest building in the area, yelled out his name and declared that he would defeat me. That time, Mito did giggle as the memory played in her head. Her guards, the other students, were on him in moments. however she had been so awestruck by his bravado that she elected to fight him herself. The match had been painfully, for Kurohoshi, short. Naruto thought back to Kakashi's bell test. Yay, that sounds like something I would do. Mito's silent giggle turned into loud laughter. Naruto soon joined in as well. It took her a while, but Mito finally managed to regain control of her laughter. I believe we are supposed to be talking strategy. Her comment sobered him up. Your first opponent is the Hyuga. That clan trains to excel at close quarters combat. Your best chance would be to keep him at a distance. Naruto shrugged as he downed another rice ball. I'm not worried, I know how to deal with him. Mito frowned. Success was the line between pride and arrogance. She wasn't quite sure which side Naruto would fall under. May I ask? Naruto grinned, it's a secret. Your mystery weapon then? The boy's grin widened. Mito sighed, though not your immediate concern, I do believe that this Sabaku no Gaara is going to be your most dangerous opponent. Naruto sighed at the thought of Gaara. Yay, he has this sand defense thing that blocks every attack that tries to hit him. Fuzzy brows could barely touch him. He then flashed her a foxy grin. I'm thinking of hitting him with 208 exploding kunai, kinda wanna see if he can block that. Mito shuddered at the number. She wasn't entirely comfortable with Naruto, or really anyone, carrying around that kind of arsenal. There are methods to defeat a Jinchuriki using Fuinjutsu, however the techniques are far too advanced for you to learn yet. The blonde shrugged, no big deal. I'm just psyche that I got the chance to show everyone that the Uzumaki clan is still badass. The redhead's eyes widened at the comment. She smiled after a moment though. Naruto, I could not help but notice that your outfit is in tatters. Naruto walked back into the room in a completely different outfit. His orange jacket was replaced with a red, sleeveless, high-collared jacket. His orange pants and blue shinobi sandals were replaced with black-colored ones. He also wore a pair of black, fingerless gloves. A spiral design was on the back of his jacket and gloves, black on the jacket and red on the gloves. His hitai was still wrapped around his forehead. 1. Mito examined the boy closely. When we first moved in here, I happened to find one of our clan's old uniforms in storage. I gave it to a tailor and asked him to alter it to your size. Naruto was still looking himself over. So this is one of our clan's uniforms. Mito pursed her lips, not exactly. The tailor took an artistic liberty and turned it into what you are wearing now. Just as well I suppose, I do not believe Uzushio's heavy armor would have been much use to you. Certainly not against your first opponent and unlikely against the others. She caught Naruto's eyes. Tell me, how do you like it? Looks cool and it's super light too. But, Naruto blushed. It's not orange. Mito bit back a snort. In a gentle tone, forgive me, but I did not take your favorite color in mind when I commissioned that outfit. She got a distant look in her eyes. Red and black were common colors of our village's shinobi force. She gestured towards herself. Mito was wearing a black top with a plaid red and black skirt, the same outfit Naruto had seen her wear when he first met her. My own attire reflects that tradition, call it a sense of nationalism, if you will. Naruto grew nervous. Didn't the first Hokage wear a red and black outfit? Mito frowned. Though his clan used similar armor, his was actually a gift from our clan, for our engagement. I specifically asked for those specifics color. His brother's armor was also a gift from us, though I asked for Tobirama's to be blue. Oh, is blue your favorite color something? No, quite the opposite actually. Naruto resisted the urge to laugh. Mito hadn't hidden her dislike of Tobirama, not by a long shot. The redhead gave him a slight nod. Tomorrow, you will be judged on many factors, not just on your combat skills. Going into a battle with ripped clothing will not look well on you. Simply wearing that clothing will give you a better chance at being promoted, so please bear with it. Naruto's eyes widened and his face paled. No, I didn't mean to sound ungrateful, because I really do like it. I was just mentioning it. I didn't realize that red and black were clan colors. Common colors, Mito corrected. Unless you were part of our leader's personal guard, our clan did not actually have a dress code. I thought you could make use of it. I am, in no way, prohibiting you from wearing orange if you wish to do so. The blonde shrugged. Honestly, I kinda like it though. Makes me feel like an actual member of the Uzumaki clan. Mito smiled at the comment. That probably sounds stupid, since you're the only person of our clan that I've ever met. It does not sound stupid at all. Naruto let out a deep breath. He then clenched his fists and smiled at the girl. Yay, I'm so going to kick ass tomorrow. I'll make our clan proud. Mito giggled. I am sure that you will. Perhaps I should offer you a reward for defeating every opponent you are put up against. Naruto blushed. Perhaps I can offer you another ninjutsu, or perhaps lessons elemental nature manipulation, or maybe something more material. How about a date? Naruto quickly interrupted. Mito's eyes widened. If I win the tournament, then how about we go out on a date? Mito's cheeks reddened. That had been a surprise. Not an unwelcome surprise, but a surprise nonetheless. She thought it over for a few moments. That would be crossing a line, one that wouldn't exist if Naruto weren't still in need of training. There was also the obvious age difference. Naruto was 13 while she was, chronologically, well over 100. Mito pursed her lips. That'd actually be a problem for anyone she could choose to be with. And, since she was biologically close to Naruto's age, it was likely that he would be the only other person able to match her lifespan. Then again, he was Kushina's son. Naruto for his part was pale. He wondered if he crossed some line that he probably should not have. He knew she had been married before, to the freaking Shodaime Hokage of all people. But that was like another life ago. He wondered if she was even interested in being with anyone. Very well, Mito began, snapping Naruto out of his thoughts. If you defeat all of your opponents, then I will allow you to court me. Naruto grinned back at her. I am so going to kick everybody's ass. Since they were expecting an early morning, neither of them stayed up too much longer. Day of the finals. The next day, Naruto woke up early, ate a small breakfast and left on his own to go to the arena. He was ushered into a room that contained most of the other contestants. Gaara was standing in the corner. Gaara's siblings' teammates, Temari and Kankuro, were standing a few feet away from their younger brother. Neji sat in the opposite corner, apparently trying to meditate. Shino leaned against a wall, alternating between staring at Neji, the guy who brutalized his teammate, to staring at Kankuro, his opponent. Sasuke, Shikamaru and Dosu were missing. Naruto opted to sit not too far from Shino, which placed him closer to Neji than Gaara. When the finals started, they would apparently all walk out into the center of the arena to hear the rules. Naruto just thought they wanted to put them all on display for everyone to see. Either way, Naruto had more important thoughts to worry about, like where he could take a girl out on a date. Ikiraku's just seemed too cheap and common. He hadn't gone to too many restaurants in his youth. Since Ichiraku's was both cheap and delicious, he didn't feel the need to. He didn't know how many of them would take issue with him being within their establishment. Maybe I could make a picnic. Do girls like picnics? He knew how to cook. Tsuki, Ayame, Iruka and even Hiruzen had taught him how to over the years. The main problem was, where could they go? The nicest place he knew of was the Senju grounds, but that just seemed a bit lazy. While deep in thought, Naruto didn't notice Shikamaru enter the waiting room. The shinobi of the Nara clan took one look around the room and immediately went to go sit between Naruto and Shino. The boy took one glance at Naruto before resting his head against the wall and shutting his eyes. Thinking about your fight? Naruto shook his head, not at all surprised when Shikamaru broke him out of his thoughts. Nah, I'm gonna to win no problem. He said loud enough for Neji to hear him. The Hyuga gave the blonde a hard stare, before continuing his meditation. Naruto glanced at the boy next to him. In a much quieter voice, "Hey, do you know a good place to take a girl to?" Shikamaru's cocked an eyebrow and shrugged at the question. "Why would I know that?" Naruto shrugged. "Where do you take Ino?" Shikamaru's cheeks heated up. "What the hell makes you think I would date such a troublesome girl?" "Oh, I just figured." "Well, you figured wrong." Shikamaru barked. Naruto held up his arms, defensively. Alright, geez." After giving the boy one last glare, Shikamaru turned away and went back to trying to nap. "Think you could ask that Suna girl for me?" Again, Shikamaru's head snapped towards Naruto. "Why would I do that?" The blonde shrugged. "I figured another girl would know, and you have a match with her, so." Shikamaru narrowed his eyes. "Yes, Naruto, sometime between her trying to bludgeon me with that giant fan and shooting blasts of wind at me, I'll try and ask her where she likes to go on dates. And maybe while she's busy trying to stab me, I'll gently stroke her hair while I'm at it. Oh, and if she decides to launch me in the air, like that Tenten girl, and catch me on her fan, I'll go ahead and tell her how beautiful she is. That all sound good to you, Naruto?" Naruto blinked a few times and stared at the boy in front of him for several moments. Go ahead if you want, but I really just need you to ask her about the date thing." Shikamaru sighed. Why does Naruto have to be so troublesome? Gambling was a well-integrated part of the Chunin exams. For the last 5 decades, a merchant family that spanned the elemental nations, the Masaki clan, headed all gambling done during the exams. Though each country's Chunin exams varied, they always ended in a one-on-one tournament styled free-for-all. That is where the Masaki clan came in. They researched each of the contestants thoroughly. The contestants' village usually provided them with any, non-classified, information on the contestants in question. They then took each of the well-researched dossiers and ranked each of the contestants accordingly. For example, Uzumaki Naruto, Konoha Genin, age, 13, sensei. Hatake Kakashi, Academy Dobi of his class. Genjutsu ability, non-existent. Taijutsu style, none. Street fighter. Chakra capacity, large. Elemental affinity, unknown. Numerous sources presume fire. Notable skills, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Notable traits, impulsive, loyal, creative, emotional. Special notes, wears a bright orange outfit. Chunin exam notes, won his preliminary match with a lucky fart. Compared to Hyuga Neji, Konoha Genin, age, 14, sensei. Meta guy, Academy Rookie of the Year of his class. Genjutsu ability, unknown, presumed immunity. Taijutsu style, Juken. Chakra capacity, large. Elemental affinity, reportedly, earth. Blood limit, Byakugan. Notable skills, Juken. Notable traits, arrogant, ruthless, intelligent. Special notes, hailed as a prodigy in his own clan. Chunin exam notes, won his preliminary match with overwhelming force. Odds, 50-1 in Hyuga Neji's favor. The Masaki clan also screens who was allowed to gamble during the exams. For example, Meta Guy was allowed to freely place bets, as long as he only placed them on his own student, Hyuga Neji. Likewise, Hatake Kakashi was allowed to place bets, as long as he placed them on either of his 2 students. However, if both of Hatake's students were to meet in a battle, then Hatake was completely prohibited from betting. This was to prevent him from asking one of his students to throw a fight, in order to win an easy bet. That was also the reason that senseis were only allowed to place bets on their own students. One Masaki Noburo sat at his desk after taking yet another bet for the upcoming exam. Next please. Noburo looked up to the next person to approach the desk he'd been provided. The man in front of him provided him with his ID. I'd like to place a bet on Uzumaki Naruto. Noburo looked at the man's ID very carefully. Yumino Iruka. The man was, reportedly, an instructor of 4 of the genin within the exam. Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke, Aburame Shino, and Nara Shikamaru. A very popular instructor, according to word of mouth. Normally something like that should have prohibited the man from placing any bets, however reports indicate that he lost touch with most of his students. Reportedly, the only student that he maintained contact with, and by extension still had any pull with, was the very student he wanted to bet on. Noburo nodded. How much are you wanting to place on him? 6,000 ryo on Naruto, all the way. Noburo nodded. Though it wasn't all that much money, and it was placed on the underdog of such a one-sided fight, it could prove fruitful if the boy managed a lucky win. Besides, there weren't nearly enough people betting on Uzumaki. Your bet is accepted. Noburo jotted a few things down on a notebook and handed Uruka a slip of paper, and there is your receipt. Good luck to you, sir. Uruka nodded and left. The man went through the seating and quickly caught sight of Naruto's new sensei. He also noted the empty seat right next to her. As he started walking down the aisle to reach her, she took notice of him and flashed him a small smile. Hey, mind if I sit with you? Of course not. She gestured towards the chair next to her. Please have a seat. Uruka sat down and looked down towards the arena. As he did so, she happened to note the receipt in his hand. The girl's features sobered up and she turned away from him. Are you a regular gambler, Yumino-san? She asked in a neutral voice. Not noting the edge in the girl's voice, Uruka just shrugged. Not really a hobby or anything like that. But hey, I know Naruto's going to win for sure, so it isn't really gambling, right? Mito turned to look at the man, shock evident on her features. After a while a smile spread on her face and she shook her head. I suppose not. Down in the arena, the battle between Naruto and Neji started with the typical banter that audience had come to expect from Chunin exams finals. It ended with Neji telling the story of his father's death. By the end of it, Naruto and Neji continued facing off, both glaring daggers at the other. I'll say it once more, give up. You are fated to lose this battle. Naruto rolled his eyes. That move was lame when you tried it on your cousin and it's lame now. Oh, and for the record, Naruto narrowed his eyes at Neji. When I shove your head up your ass, it's because you suck and I'm awesome, not because I was fated to shove your head up your ass. Neji scowled at the blonde. Since you won't listen to reason, Byakugan. The Hyuga activated his blood limit. At the same time, Naruto pulled out a Fuma Shuriken from one of his pouches. He snapped it open, holding it by the ring, and held it out in front of him. The Fuma Shuriken had some strange black symbols painted on it. The blonde smirked. My prized creation, the Uzumaki Shuriken. Neji nearly rolled his eyes. A Fuma Shuriken isn't something new, you idiot. You haven't seen a Fuma Shuriken like this one, the blonde laughed. That time, Neji did roll his eyes. Either way, only an arrogant fool would name weapon after himself. Well, I wanted to name it the Go Fuck Yourself Shuriken, but for the life of me I couldn't figure out how to curse in Japanese. Naruto looked down. It really shouldn't be so hard to learn how to curse in Japanese. 2. Again, Neji rolled his eyes and prepared his strategy. He knew from the Uzumaki's last battle that Naruto wasn't very fast and that he wasn't too strong. Neji's strategy was simple. Avoid the shuriken and get into close range to knock out the younger boy with a gentle fist strike. Naruto tossed the Fuma Shuriken, parallel to the ground. A moment later, he placed his hand in the ram seal, Kai. Before everyone's eyes four pure black, regular-sized shuriken appeared from the Uzumaki Shuriken and launched themselves in opposite directions. A quarter of a second later, a second set erupted from the Uzumaki Shuriken. And then a third set, and a fourth set, and a fifth set. Neji's eyes widened as the one large shuriken started spewing out many small ones. He blocked one shuriken, and then a second, and finally just dropped down, allowing the blades to fly over his head. Up in the stands, Mito stared wide-eyed at Naruto's creation. Everything he did was just so simple. He took a Fuma shuriken and sealed Kami knows how many shadow shurikens into each of the 4 blades. She could tell they were nothing but shadow clone shurikens because they disappeared the moment they impacted with a hard surface. He then set the seals to release and launch each of the shurikens in rapid succession. And no doubt, if the Fuma shuriken passed over Neji, Naruto would reveal X. Back in the arena, Neji watched as Naruto's special Fuma shuriken passed over his head. With his blood limit, Neji watched as the Uzumaki shuriken continued flying, waiting until the damn thing crashed into the wall and stopped spinning. On the other side, he watched Naruto do a quick chain of hand seals and prepared to dodge a second attack. Soshujin. Before Neji's eyes, Naruto's custom Fuma shuriken turned away from the wall and came flying back towards Neji. However, the angle of the blade twisted a few degrees so that it was no longer parallel to the ground. Again, Neji was forced to dodge the shadowy shurikens. Naruto grinned as he, remotely, twisted and turned his Uzumaki shuriken, trying to continuously angle the weapon so that it continued firing shurikens in Neji's direction. Neji continuously blocked and rolled away from each of the shurikens. Blocking was semi-painful, however avoiding could potentially be dangerous. If he leapt too far, he ran the risk of landing in the path of another one of the shuriken. He considered using the Kaden, but stopped himself. He didn't want to use his trump card unless he absolutely needed to. Soon enough, Naruto's shuriken lost momentum and eventually landed helplessly on the ground, 10 feet away from the Hyuga, no longer firing shadow clone shuriken. Neji was about to turn on the Uzumaki, for putting him in such a disgraceful position, when the Uzumaki shuriken exploded. Though far away enough to avoid serious injury, the force of the blast knocked Neji off of his feet and accidentally forced him to release control of his Byakugan. Quickly composing himself, Neji jumped to his feet and reactivated his blood limit. And then his heart skipped a beat. Naruto stood in the same position he was before, a shit-eating grin on his face. Except this time he was standing in line with 9, presumably, shadow clones. Each of them was holding an Uzumaki shuriken. Up in the stands, though concerned for her teammate, Tenten had a little tiny orgasm. The proctor, one Shiranui Genma, took the opportunity to leave the arena. Neji dashed towards the blondes. His plan was simply to get in short range, like he should have done earlier, of the Uzumaki so that it would be suicide for him to use those thrice-damned Fuma shurikens. He would then use the Kaden to hit the real boy and dispel the clones. And if the boy were stupid enough to use the blades at short range, then he would simply rely on the Kaden to protect himself. Instead of standing there or throwing one of the blades, one of the Narutos stabbed their Uzumaki shuriken into the ground and lunged forward to intercept the Hyuga. Neji glared at the clone, he presumed it was a clone at least. He'd juken the clone and continued with his original plan. And if it so happened to the real Naruto, he'd finish the boy off in one strike. When Naruto and Neji were both in striking distance, they both shot out with an open palm thrust. Both attacks, concurrently, connected. Unfortunately for the Hyuga, he made the mistake of judging Naruto by the speed he showed in the preliminaries. Neji's Juken strike hit Naruto in the heart, dispelling the clone. The clone's strike hit Neji in the stomach, knocking the wind out of the Hyuga and sending him Hyuga flying several meters backwards. After Naruto created a clone to replace the one that was just dispelled, and together the 10 Narutos tossed the Uzumaki shurikens. The moment Neji got back to his feet, he was forced to block and evade the shadow clone shurikens. After missing one and getting cut on the forearm, Neji began spinning, Kaden. The sound of hundreds of shurikens crashing into Neji's barrier was deafening. The moment Neji began to lose momentum, he would kick off, trying to regain his spin. He held the Kaden for as long as he could, knowing that he would be made into a pincushion if he stopped then. By the end, he ran out of chakra around the same time that the blades lost momentum and fell harmlessly to the ground. Neji fell as well, cutting off the flow of chakra to his technique in order to avoid fainting via chakra exhaustion. He held himself up with his hands, not forgetting for a moment about the explosion that erupted from the last Fuma Shuriken, and he was surrounded by 10 of them. Fear clenched his heart. Stop. Genma called out, having returned to the arena after the Uzumaki Shurikens stopped spinning, staring sternly at Naruto. The match is over, the victor is Uzumaki Naruto. The crowd cheered at that. Meanwhile Naruto dispelled his clones and walked over to pick up his custom Fuma Shuriken. The explosion was mostly a means to protect them from being taken and copied, not so much as an extra attack, though it did serve that purpose. However, without it, he needed to pick them up ASAP and seal them away from prying eyes. At least I won't have to buy new ones. Naruto glanced at the prone body of Hyuga Neji. If his heavy breathing was anything to go by, the boy was close to chakra exhaustion. He turned back to pick up one of his shuriken. Glad I thought up these things, they were useful. Neji scoffed. You also gave away your greatest weapon in the first battle and wasted all of them. The blonde grinned. First off, these things are not my greatest weapons. I actually made them like 5 days ago, or something. I used them on you so people wouldn't figure out what I've actually been working on this past month. The blonde grinned at Neji's shocked grin. Oh, and I didn't use all of my Uzumaki shurikens on you, I just didn't feel it necessary to hit you with 52 of them at the same time. 52 shuriken, plus the one he used at the beginning of the fight meant he came into the battle with 53 Uzumaki shuriken. I also have 208 exploding kunai. 53 and 208. The blonde shrugged. I hate round numbers. Then Naruto's smile widened. Oh, and for my next invention, I think I'm going to pack an Uzumaki shuriken with exploding shuriken. Naruto spread his arms out, explosions everywhere. It's going to be so badass. Up in the stands, though no one could actually hear the two boys' conversation, Tenten had another orgasm. Sadly, even though he could freely clone kunai and shuriken, the shuriken cage bunshin no jutsu wasn't sophisticated enough to copy any seals that happened to be on those weapons. Yet, Naruto crouched down next to Neji. I should probably mention, you know that rule back at the academy that said we weren't allowed to have explosive tags, that rule was made for people like me. Neji shivered at the comment. You weren't bad by the way. It's a pity we can't be friends. It'd be great having someone like you watching my back when I become Hokage. TCH. Idiot. Still thinking you got what it takes to become the Hokage. Think about it. You can give me your answer when I change your clan. Huh. Neji glared at the boy. What? Naruto tapped his forehead. I kinda get the protecting your bloodline thing, all-seeing eyes whatever, but I think that being able to kill members of your family with a single hand sign is the most horrible thing ever, and I'm going to outlaw it. Neji stared at Naruto as if he grew a second head. The boy shrugged. Seems like slavery to me. My Konoha isn't going to be a place where slavery exists. It's as simple as that. All I ask is that you stop doing shit that pisses me off, like hurting your cousin. Neji scowled at that. Naruto glared at Neji. She may be creepy, but she's also super nice too. Believe it or not, she actually still loves you, despite the fact that you put her in the hospital. And how would you know that? I'm empathetic, trust me. Neji scoffed. So what? I watch your back and you get rid of the caged bird seal. Naruto shook his head. No, I get rid of the caged bird seal, and that's it. At Neji's look the blonde shrugged. Like I said, my Konoha won't be a place where people can just enslave their family. With that, Naruto got up and turned to leave. Though Naruto didn't know it at the time, and Neji wasn't prepared to admit it, at that moment, Naruto had just gained his first follower. Later. After several fights, Mito watched uneasily as things slowly went to hell before her eyes. Iruka immediately jumped to his feet and told her to stay where she was, before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. As if she jumped out of her seat, concealed herself with a genjutsu, and tried to weigh her options. She found herself completely out of the loop. She didn't know any of Konoha's defensive plans or contingencies. In the end, she could either start randomly attacking random enemy shinobi or try to find and stay with people whom she personally knew. Hiruzen and Naruto were the likeliest of choices. The Sandaime had disappeared with the cage somewhere near the top of the stadium. The blonde Uzumaki had apparently spoken with his sensei and left to go on some assignment, she assumed. Though she longed to go with Naruto, she knew she had to find Hiruzen. Naruto was an unknown. The aged Hokage's plans had made sure of that, if nothing else. Hiruzen was the Hokage and had been for decades. If anyone were a target, it would be the Sandaime Hokage, not an unknown Jinchuriki. It was likely that this invasion had plans to deal with Hiruzen, and she swore to make sure they would fail. Miles away in the forest, Naruto, with Kakashi's dog Pakun at his side, scanned the battlefield before him. Sasuke and the thing that Gaara had turned into were facing off. Sakura was trapped against a tree by what looked to be Gaara's sand. Temari was much further away, hiding. He concentrated on his clairvoyant empathy so he could get a read on the battlefield. Sasuke had anger and stung pride rolling off of him, with a tinge of fear hidden away. Gaara was pure bloodlust. He was getting nothing from Sakura, which either meant that she was unconscious or dead. If he killed her, I'm going to take his fucking head off. Naruto silently swore. Temari was fear, just fear. It pissed him off, but he turned away from her to take a look at Sakura. He reached her with a few jumps and checked her over. Good. She's still breathing. He tried pulling at the girl's bindings, but the sand seemed to circle all the way around the tree. He raised his fist and smashed it against the sand, sending cracks down it. A second strike and Sakura was free. He turned to his teammate, Sasuke. Naruto tossed Sakura towards Sasuke and stood between the Uchiha and the other Jinchuriki. Gaara growled at Naruto, "Get out of my way. I will kill Uchiha Sasuke." Gaara leapt at Naruto, raising his massive hand to bat the boy away. Naruto rushed the other Jinchuriki and slammed him with a vertical kick that sent Gaara flying down towards the forest floor. Naruto followed shortly afterwards, landing a few feet away from Gaara. He noted the surprise that rolled off of Gaara and the three spectators. Naruto glared at the boy in front of him. I wouldn't be worried about him. Mito arrived at a barrier and knelt next to 7 Anbu, all who were in similar positions. Within the barrier, she saw Hiruzen, in his battle armor, standing across from his former student Orochimaru of all people. The captain, an Anbu in a white cloak, recognized her as the new Fuin master that had been working around Konoha and asked her what she thought of the barrier. According to the captain, the barrier incinerated anything that touched it. She didn't recognize the technique, though she did note that 4 different individuals were channeling the barrier. She began thinking of a way to get past it when Hiruzen made eye contact with her. Though no words passed between them, and he was far too far for her to hear anything he said either way, his message was quite clear: this is my fight, stay out of it. Mito didn't know whether it was a sense of duty or his pride that led him to such a decision, but in the end she decided to follow his wishes and leave him to fight his battle. Until Orochimaru made the biggest mistake of his soon-to-be short life. The group of Anbu glanced at the girl who had an aura of ki rolling off of her. They watched her stand. Captain, I will bring the barrier down, so please prepare your unit for battle. I will be back shortly. Not waiting for a response, Mito disappeared in a swirl of leaves. She figured it would be an easy enough task to dispel the barrier, and she'd even take out one of Orochimaru's bodyguards while she was at it. The other 3 would quickly join Orochimaru. She took a few moments to gaze at the 4 occupants, trying to determine the most dangerous. The large boy with the mohawk was the obvious choice, if only because he elicited a primal fear within her, as the largest of the 4. However, if she learned anything over her long life, it was that size wasn't everything. The next choice was the only female of the group. While she couldn't readily tell if she was any more dangerous than the other three, Mito was already leaning towards her. Mito, and the Anbu unit, had the unfortunate luck of being closest to her, and Mito found the girl's deplorable tongue to be quite offensive to her sense of hearing. The next one was another boy, this one with 6 arms. Unknown bloodline perhaps, a possible taijutsu specialist. He could definitely prove to be problematic. The last choice was a silvered-hair boy with 2 heads. Mito frowned as she gazed at him. A second later, Mito returned to the Anbu unit. She turned to the captain. I will assassinate the one with gray hair. When that happens, the barrier should dispel and leave the other 3 open to attack. You must not allow them to reach their master, understood? 7 heads nodded at her. Again, she disappeared in a swirl of leaves and reappeared in front of the 2-headed Sound Nin. Nothing but the barrier in between them. Sakin sneered at the girl in front of him. The fuck are you looking at, bitch? Any other time, Mito might have stepped in to correct such behavior. Dead people didn't need such lessons. Instead, she placed her hands in the hair hand seal, and began concentrating on the water molecules around her. She then held out her hand, curling all but her pointer and middle finger. She drew a circle, 6 inches in diameter, in the air, blue symbols forming after her fingers: Fuinjutsu, Reigen Tenshi, Sealing Art, Heartless Angel. Sakin flinched at the circle of light that appeared between him and Mito. Even with the purple barrier obstructing his sight of everything on the outside, he still found the light to be blinding. It also successfully distracted Sakin from the distortion that appeared behind him. Mito then grabbed an explosive note and tossed it at the circle. The note disappeared the moment it hit the circle and reappeared in the distortion behind Sakin. Ukin's eyes widened at the lit-up explosive note. Mito dispelled the circle and distortion concurrently. A moment later, the note exploded. What remained of Sakin, and Ukin, were forced into the purple wall and incinerated almost instantly. A second later, the barrier dropped. The remainder of the Sound Four were shocked to find their defense gone and even more surprised when a pair of Anbu jumped each of them. Mito paid them no mind. Instead, she just walked towards the 4 figures that had originally been isolated by the barrier. Hiruzen, the idiot that created a disgusting ninjutsu, the soon-to-be-dead Snake Sanin, and her late husband. Hiruzen sighed as he glanced at Mito. Not that he could particularly blame her. If the situation were reversed, he sure as hell wouldn't wait around on the sidelines. He just prayed that she wasn't too out of practice. Orochimaru turned to glare at the person that derailed his plans. She didn't waste any such time. Again she placed her hands in the hair seal, this time drawing out more chakra. Fuinjutsu. Reigen Tenshi, Sealing Art, Heartless Angel. Again, a blue circle appeared a few feet in front of Mito. A moment later, 15 similar circles appeared around to the first one. Orochimaru tensed up as he tried to look through the wall of light. The blinding light effectively cut off the mysterious redhead from his line of sight. It also made it next to impossible to notice the 16 distortions that surrounded Orochimaru and the 2 undead Hokage. Behind the wall, Mito pulled out a pouch that contained 50 painted Senbon needles. The first one she threw hit the center circle, disappeared, reappeared from one of the distortions and nailed the Nadaime in the back of the head. The other 49 needles followed a moment later, each disappearing after hitting a different circle and reappearing from different distortions. Before the Snake Sanin knew it, he, along with the 2 undead Hokages, were turned into pincushions. Orochimaru cursed himself for allowing the girl to distract him with a simple light trick. He was about to pull out one of the needles when he felt a strange chakra emerge from them. Eyes wide, Orochimaru quickly shed his skin, concurrently freeing himself from the Senbon, before using a simple kawarimi to escape the area. For a moment, just one instant, Mito's eyes met with Hashirama's. A pang of guilt erupted in her chest as she placed her hands in the dragon seal, Raiju. 3. Each Sinban needle discharged electricity with the force of a lightning bolt, and together, unleashed a blue explosion that engulfed the Shodaime and Nadaime, as well as Orochimaru's discarded skin. When it cleared, the smell of ozone filled the air. The floor, which was actually roof tiles, underneath them cracked and turned to dust. All traces of the two Hokages were gone. Orochimaru was shocked that the girl's attack seemed to have actually destroyed corpses resurrected by the Edo Tensei. After a moment, however, he felt the corpses begin to regenerate, slowly. Kaden. Karyu Enden, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet. Distracted a second time, Orochimaru leapt to the right to avoid a fire dragon that would have burned him to ash. He turned to see the user, an Anbu, with a white cloak that marked him as a captain. Sadly, for the snake Sannin, he didn't notice when his former sensei appeared behind him, staff in hand, and took his head clean off. Orochimaru shed his skin again. Meanwhile, Mito took the opportunity to seal the remains of the two dead Kage before they could regenerate. Hiruzen, with Enma in the form of a staff, and Orochimaru, with the Kusanagi, were trading blows. Orochimaru was careful enough to keep the Sandaime between himself and the Anbu captain, but even he knew when things were going south. He could see that Jirobo was already down, pierced through the chest by a spear of dirt of all things, and that Tayuya and Kitamaru were slowly being pushed back by the pair of Anbu they each fought. Your guards are falling, Orochimaru. Hiruzen growled. Your treachery will not overcome the Leaf Village. Pity, they made such good subjects. Orochimaru glared at the old man and they crossed weapons. This isn't the end, you old fool, you grow slower and more feeble every single day. I will return to burn this accursed village to the ground and salt the earth. Orochimaru leapt backwards and spewed out a cloud of black smoke. He turned to escape, but only managed to get 5 steps away before an unseen force pulled him to the ground. The ground roof around Orochimaru began glowing in strange symbols. He tried to get up, but found his body far too heavy to do so. From the right, he saw the mysterious redhead some distance away. From his hand, the Kusanagi disappeared. He then growled and extended his neck out of the seal's area of effect. Orochimaru's neck continued to stretch to gross proportions. Orochimaru opened his mouth, regurgitating a snake, which regurgitated the Kusanagi. Orochimaru's head continued on its path towards the redhead, prepared to stab her with the legendary blade. Mito made no move. When Orochimaru's blade was a few feet away from piercing Mito, a purple-eyed black rabbit jumped in its path. The rabbit parried the Kusanagi with a katana big enough for a grown human to wield. The two blades clashed and the Kusanagi managed to create a centimeter-long nick in the rabbit's blade, but otherwise the katana held. A second later, Orochimaru's abnormally long neck was cut in half by Hiruzen's staff, and his body, which was still trapped within the weight seal, was engulfed by a second Kaden, Karyu Enden. Orochimaru shed his skin again. When he was back on his feet, he found himself surrounded by Hiruzen, Mito, the Anbu captain and the Black Rabbit. With his peripheral vision he saw that Kitamaru's head was separated from his shoulders and Tayuya was currently surrounded by the other 6 Anbu. He realized escape was, indeed, his only viable option. Orochimaru bit his thumb and did a quick chain of hand seals and leapt backwards as far as he could. Kuchiyos, Sanju Rashomon. 3 enormous demonic gates suddenly appeared, shooting out of the ground, between Orochimaru and his opponents. As Orochimaru turned to escape, he used his still bleeding thumb as a catalyst for his next jutsu, Kuchiyos no Jutsu. A large explosion of smoke erupted around Orochimaru and suddenly the snake Sannin found himself standing on Manda. However, before the smoke fully cleared, and Manda could adjust to his surroundings, Kuchiyos, Yutai Kuzushi no Jutsu, summoning, food cart destroy technique. The toad boss, known as Gamabunta, landed on Manda's head and slamming it against the ground, crushing the snake Sannin in the process. The giant toad then took his sword and stuck it through the snout of the snake boss. Fearing for his life, Manda swallowed his pride and quickly dispelled itself. Orochimaru shed his skin again. Tired of fucking dying, and nearly out of chakra, the snake Sanin looked up to find himself surrounded. Jiraiya and Gamabunta blocked his back. Hiruzen, Mito, the Black Rabbit and the Anbu captain, who finally got around the Rashomon gates, blocked his front. Finally, the 6 Anbu that were dealing with his bodyguards surrounded him from the left and the right. After weighing his options and chances, Orochimaru could only sigh in annoyance. Hiruzen raised his staff and pointed it at the snake Sanin. Stand down, Orochimaru. From his peripherals, Orochimaru saw something that made him grin. You fools. While you waste your time with me, the Ikibi will level your precious village to the ground. 12 pairs of eyes turned towards the site of the Biju Shukaku, who towered over even the largest buildings in the village. Orochimaru grinned. Weep at your own weakness as you watch your beloved village. No. The San Biju screamed out before it was engulfed 208 explosions. A large cloud of smoke concealed it from everyone's sight. Orochimaru paled, which was medically possible for him to do. After the smoke cleared and Shukaku was nowhere to be seen, 12 pairs of eyes turned back towards Orochimaru. The snake Sanin slapped his hand on his forehead. End. Omake. Pikarism, aka the recruitment that was too ridiculous not to be an omake. A mere day after the failed invasion, Mito found herself at the Senju compound, sitting on one of the couches. And she was not alone. Mito sighed as she looked over the piece of paper that had been thrust into her hand. Tenten-san, forgive my familiarity, but I am having difficulty reading your surname. Tenten smiled up at the slightly older girl. You can call me Uzumaki if you want. I doubt your parents would approve. Mito looked over the paper and scowled. Please stop rubbing your cheek against my feet. Tenten frowned, but didn't let go of Mito's bare feet. Would you like a foot massage? No, I would not. The moment Tenten had the chance, she began hunting down Naruto to persuade him into giving her a free lesson. When she found out that Naruto had a sensei who supposedly taught him everything he knew in just under a month, she switched targets. Unfortunately for the girl, forgive Tenten-san, but I am not accepting any students at this time. Tenten's eyes widened. But you accepted Naruto. Mito nodded. We are kin, Naruto and I. It is a different matter. Tenten released her feet and grabbed onto Mito's legs. She had to learn how to create the Uzumaki Shuriken. She just had to get her hands on that type of hardcore weaponry. Then adopt me. Mito flinched at the girl's contact. I apologize, but I am not adopting any new members into my clan at this time. Then accept me as your sex slave. Mito blushed at the girl's comment. I apologize, but I am not accepting any sex slaves at this time. Then accept me as your broodmare. You guys need to revive your clan, right? I'll give you lots of babies. At that moment, Naruto and Sasuke happened to be walking by the doorway to the living area that Mito and Tenten occupied. The two had been training in the grounds just moments ago. Naruto's eyes were wide. He slowly scooted away. What the hell? Sasuke just narrowed his eyes at the girl, before shaking his head in disgust. Man, some people will do anything for power. He then followed after Naruto. Mito paled. I apologize, but I am not accepting any broodmares at this time. Mito stood up and began moving, as best as she could with Tenten holding her legs, towards the door. I am sorry, my dear, but you have wasted your time. No, don't say that. Tenten clutched onto the older girl harder than before. Eventually though, Mito managed to drag herself and Tenten to the door. Please, mistress, teach me how to make super weapons. My dear. Mito opened the front door. The appearance of Jiraiya stopped her line of thought. Jiraiya. Before she could say anything further, Tenten stood up and got in Jiraiya's face. Tenten seethed with barely controlled rage. Your presence offends the mistress. Jiraiya cocked an eyebrow. Tenten then kicked the man in the crotch. When Jiraiya bent forward to clutch himself, she punched him in the face. Tenten then slammed the door shut and turned to smile back at Mito. Mito just stared at the girl for a few moments. Tenten-san. Tenten looked at the older girl with longing eyes. Perhaps there is something I can teach you after all. Tenten's eyes widened. She fell to her knees and clutched the older girl's legs. Thank you, 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 thank you. Mito nodded and patted the girl on the back. You're welcome. Please return here at 7 tomorrow morning. They stayed in that position for well over a minute. Please let go of my legs. Tenten took a long whiff of the other girl's clothes. In a minute, I just want to bask in your awesome. My dear, I believe you should seek psychiatric help. Already did that. Took them 5 sessions to diagnose me with picarism.